Today, we'll go over opening day at Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the 104th running of the Indy 500. Formula E Berlin E-Prix was today. We'll tell you about the chaotic day of racing at the Berlin circuit and Christopher Bell heading to the 20 team. We'll talk more about this and a lot more right here on Grid Tonight. On a very special program because today is the opening day for Indianapolis 500 practice. With that said, definitely just want to thank you all for joining us. Be sure to comment in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. The unique circumstances of the pandemic has allowed the Grid Network here the opportunity to provide you coverage of the 104th running of the Indianapolis 500 IndyCar race. We are excited for this opportunity to present to you coverage throughout the month of August and looking forward to keep you informed of all the activities at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We thank you for the support of the Grid Network for allowing us to broadcast to you, and we're definitely excited to hear all what happened today at Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Oh yes, day one of the Indianapolis 500 practice feels crazy that we finally made it to the month of August. It seems like forever, since we heard that in May that it was going to be postponed to August, and finally, after months of waiting, it's finally here. And starting off the day, track time overall was from 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. But however, it was split into different sections with the veterans getting on track from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then they had a little break while the rookies and drivers taking their refresher test from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time were on track, and then from 3 p.m. to 5:30, that's when everybody took to the track. And after practice today, the drivers were reporting that it felt a little different, with the cars due to the addition of the aero screen, with all the weight added to the front of the car, creating more drag. So, Joe, with the addition of the aero screen, should we expect more passing in this year's Indy 500 with way more drag?
Definitely more drag is going to make it a lot interesting to Indy 500. The question is, with this drag, how big of a window are we going to see? Of course, as the air goes over, there's always a certain gap between the air and the car. So a good example, a big semi truck, you could be pretty far behind it and still feel the effect of the draft slipstream. Indy cars, of course, are much smaller. So if this is big enough, it can make a huge difference where a car further back could pick up that draft and move up. But at the same time, we got to be a little bit careful. If you're a little too far back or a little too close, how is that dirty air going to affect it? It's going to be really interesting to see, especially as the month progresses, how all the drivers adjust to the different handling cars.
Yes, certainly. I think this year's show is definitely going to be more interesting, and especially after watching all of those drivers out on track today. Day one, finally at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Oval, the historic speedway, and it looked like the final day of practice because those drivers, they were slicing and dicing and definitely getting that much needed track time prior, 1 week prior to the race, and also looking at what happened today, we had our first yellow just after noon Eastern time when Marco Andretti came to a complete stop at the entrance of pit road. And every season, prior to the green flag dropping, fans always say it's gonna be Marco's year. However, it seems like everything seems to work against Marco Andretti as he's trying to break the Andretti curse at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Indy 500. And his father, Michael Andretti, has the best finish of second in 1991, and he's led so many laps at this racetrack and performed really well, but he never won the Indy 500, and many consider Michael Andretti one of the greatest drivers to never win the Indianapolis 500. And then the late John Andretti had a best finish of fifth in 1991 as well, so they had two Andrettis in the top five on that day. And the great Mario Andretti won the 1969 Indianapolis 500, and that was certainly a nice day for him. But since then, there hasn't been an Andretti in victory lane in the Indy 500. However, Marco Andretti came close in 2006 when he finished second. It was a heartbreaking defeat to Sam Hornish Jr., who just passed him coming to the checker flag. So, Joe, in the year 2020, will this finally be the year where the Andretti curse comes to an end, or will Marco Andretti continue to be snake bitten at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway?
If I knew the answer to that, I'll be definitely selling that answer to all the people wanting to place bets, because It's too early to tell. This morning, bad luck, but definitely if he has the speed up there, I mean, he got good equipment. He could definitely contend for the win. This is the Indianapolis 500, though. Everybody's on their A game. Everybody's trying their best to win the race. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Mark Unready can put some of the bad luck, put in some fast laps, and contend for the win. 500 miles is going to be a long race and definitely a lot of time to win. And as he found out, to lose, you could lead the race coming exiting the final corner, but then lose on the main stretch.
Yeah, certainly. Marco Andretti, his day didn't start off the best, but by the end of the day, Marco Andretti walked away from his car looking very confident. The number 98 Andretti Honda definitely looks strong today, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep that speed up. Throughout practice, qualifying, and heading into the race as well. And looking back at the early session, late morning, early afternoon, Scott Dixon was fastest in the veterans only section, turning a lap time. I mean a top speed at 224 miles per hour, and then later on, rookie Renus VK was fastest in the rookie and refresher session at 221 miles per hour, and after that, Tony Kanaan got in rookie Dalton Kellett's car, who struggled to find speed in the rookie session, and Tony Kanaan, being the professional and veteran driver that he is, he offered to step into Kellett's car to assess the situation, and throughout this time, there was a lot of slipstream and passing on the track. Action was definitely starting to heat up in the afternoon at Indianapolis. And however, there was a yellow for a track inspection, and then NBC Sports Gold showed Tony Kanaan debriefing with Dalton Kellett's team, with Kellett standing right there listening to what the veteran driver had to say. And for a rookie like Dalton Kellett, how significant is it to have a well experienced teammate such as Tony Kanaan to lean on?
Very significant. Tony Kanaan, of course, past winner of the Indianapolis 500. There's no other event like this globally. Yeah, if you're brand new to road racing, to a certain track, you could take elements from other tracks and try to put together and learn the track. Indianapolis 500 is its own unique character. There's no other track like this. There's no other race like this in the world. So coming in as a rookie, you're learning everything, not through experience, but from other people's experience. To have a teammate, especially Tony Kanaan, to go out there, shake down your car, give technical feedback, and then tell you this is what the car's doing, this is what you should be looking at too, taking care of the tires here, being more aggressive in these corners, careful in these corners. It's very valuable, and I think he's gaining so much knowledge that's really going to help him perform.
And Tony Kanaan did say when he was a rookie and come to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first time, he wished he had someone to do that for him. What he did for Dalton Kellett today, just being a great teammate and the well respected veteran driver that he is, having somebody who's been there, done that, hop in a car for a rookie, heading into something that he's never done before. This is Dalton Kellett's very first Indianapolis 500 that he's going to be a part of, and I'm sure he's going to be very appreciative of Tony Kanaan stepping in and trying to give him those pointers that will hopefully help that will certainly help him get better as time goes on. And speaking of time, in the final hour of practice, business definitely picked up big time as the drivers. It was I believe it was after 4:30, like going after 5 o'clock, and with the Indianapolis 500 starting late this year, after 2 Eastern time, these are potentially race ending conditions that they might be racing in. So it's definitely important for them to get that track time. Go out there, see how your car works in traffic. Like, is it like am I able to suck up in the slipstream and pass well? And like, what do we need to work on Thursday, Friday? Qualifying, heading into the race. However, we had a minor incident that didn't end in tears, thankfully. Which when Charlie Kimball brushed the wall late in the practice session, he got a little sideways, but ended up saving it. And practice actually ended at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. But 32 cars were on track except for one, and that was the number 81 Dragon Speed entry with driver Ben Hanley, as they were still in the garage working, and his regular practice was coming to an end. Ben Hanley's car made its way to the grid, and according to the NBC Sports Gold broadcast, they said that IndyCar would allow Hanley to take track time all by himself from 5:35 to 6 p.m. Eastern time, so Hanley would be able to shake down his car. And now looking at the top 10 fastest from day one, Got James Hinchcliffe and Marco Andretti. Andretti 1-2, looking good so far to start off the month of August. Scott Dixon, championship points leader, third. Ryan Hunter-Reay, fourth. Third Andretti car in the top five. And then two-time Formula One world champion Fernando Alonso, fifth. Joseph Newgarden, sixth. Jack Harvey, seventh. Rookie Alex Palou in eighth. Connor Daly, ninth. And Helio Castroneves making his return in 10th. And now looking at the notables, outside of the top 10, we have defending Indianapolis 500 champion Simon Pagenaud in 12th. Then we got Alexander Rossi down in 18th, Ed Carpenter in 20th, and then Fernando Alonso, while he was in the top five, his two younger teammates, Pato O'Ward down in 28th, and Oliver Askew 31st on the speed chart. And the speed and the top 10 list that we just showed you, those are the overall speeds, not the no-toe reports. And Joe, for any of our viewers out there unfamiliar with IndyCar, can you explain what no-toe means?
Yeah, so no-toe means essentially going out there by yourself, nobody to get a tow from. The tow is essentially the term for when a car is behind another car and getting that air to keep going and we get a faster lap time. It's sort of the reason why, especially like when we saw group qualifying in NASCAR with that aero package, you didn't want to be the first one out. You'll be the slowest, but the ones behind you, you could get that tow and they'll go a lot faster to you. So that's what they mean by no tow.
Yeah, Andretti, looking back at Andretti Autosport, they started the season off slow across the board. Texas was an absolute disaster for that team. And the rest of the season is slowly getting better, but, not where they want to be. Right now, the only Andretti drivers in the top 10 in points are Colton Herta and Alexander Rossi. But however, today, day one, Indianapolis for the 500-mile race, Andretti definitely looked good. They had three cars in the top five fastest overall speeds. And looking at the no-toe reports, had four Andretti cars, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then Andretti affiliate Meyer Shank Racing ran out the top five with Jack Harvey. Yeah, so Andretti's definitely looking good so far when it comes to how they're going to be qualifying with no toe. Would you consider that a successful start to the month of August for Andretti Autosport?
Yes, definitely has to be a successful start because essentially this season with the pandemic, very little track time, just essentially like in Texas, they had 1 day of the practice, qualifying, race. So very little time on the track. Of course, Indianapolis is a different breed, and to come out much faster, got a lot of cars in the top 10. They're looking really strong. The big thing is keeping strong all month long. They got to make sure they got good equipment to last the all 500 miles and the entire month of August.
For sure, Andretti Autosports definitely going to need to make sure that they are able to carry that speed. Today, tomorrow, the next day, and the next day, and then especially for the race, in order to make sure that although the season hasn't really gone well for them so far, across their teams, you can definitely turn it around and have something to smile about after lap 200 on August 23rd when we have the 104th running of the Indianapolis 500. And looking at Fernando Alonso, what a difference a year makes. He was fifth fastest today overall, and he got up to speed quickly and looked like a natural out there. Who have been running who've been running like every IndyCar race since then. And looking at this year, Aaron McLaren SP, that team definitely has their act together this year. Great program building with those two young drivers, Pato O'Ward, Oliver Askew. Now you throw in a two-time Formula One world champion in Fernando Alonso. Definitely this team is well prepared for what's to come. And looking back at the solo McLaren racing effort last year in 2019, let's just be honest, that was an absolute disaster. The car had no speed whatsoever. It looked like the car was literally dragging an anchor around the racetrack, and they just could not do anything with that car. It was just a dumpster fire, to be perfectly blunt. And reflecting on Fernando Alonso's disastrous bump day last year, how refreshing must it be for him this year, knowing that it's impossible for him to get bumped this year with only 33 drivers and McLaren giving him a car that looked very competitive out there today.
Very refreshing. You said it, last year was just a mess of a mess. Everything that could go wrong went wrong, and then to get bumped, it made huge news. Of course, it got the media attention. This year, he knows he's in the race. So the big focus, try to just get a good setup for qualifying and have a really good setup for the car. if he's up front towards the Indianapolis 500, he has a real shot at winning. And I know we're going to talk a little later on about the pressure about trying to get that win this year, especially.
Yes, certainly. Fernando Alonso, I'm sure he's able to sleep a lot better this year and a lot less frustrated as well because the car Arrow McLaren SP gave him today definitely off to a great start in the month of August. And although his teammates Pato O'Ward and Oliver Askew are are down on speed day one, I wouldn't be concerned right now because you don't have to worry about getting bumped. And I'm sure they're going to look at the data on Alonso's car and see what they can put on those two youngsters' car, but however, by the time the race rolls around, I'm sure Arrow McLaren SP will have everything ready to go for the 500-mile race.
Yeah, they'll have everything ready to go for all their drivers. It's going to be a good indicator to see how they're doing at the Indianapolis 500. Now, of course, Indianapolis 500, that is a really big sporting event. A lot of people are going to be watching that, especially people that would traditionally be in Las Vegas placing bets. That's going to be a big thing this year. It's a little different. But one of the big news that came out yesterday was NASCAR and BetMGM made an agreement, and they announced it on Tuesday. This agreement will allow betting on the MGM betting app to allow also in race bets. So such ideas such as which team's going to have the fastest pit stops time, all sorts of information. Now, of course, with all the sports betting going on, we're seeing more and more increased demand for the statistics from racing series, not just NASCAR, but every racing series. People want to know drivers' average finishes, pit stop times from every team. It's becoming a bigger demand. So it's going to be really interesting to see how everything turns out. Do you think this is healthy for motorsports to have essentially all these betting companies try to get all this information and overall for the sport?
Well, honestly, Joe, I really don't know a lot about I don't really know a lot about betting in general, but I think it could potentially be good for the world of motorsports. All of these people who know what they're doing when it comes to betting, them having access to all of this information. It, although some of those people may not know a lot about the sport, some of them probably do. But this might be a good way to get new eyes on the sports and people unfamiliar with betting and NASCAR and all of that. That could certainly be a way for them to be like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna start betting on this, and then when you actually take a look at what's going on in the sport, be like, hey, this is actually pretty cool. So it could be a way of attracting a brand new group of fans. So I think there's definitely some upside to this news today.
Yeah, with the news today, definitely we're seeing a lot of times, besides just trying to bet on like who's going to win the race, especially the in race betting they're talking about, such as which team's going to have the fastest pit stops time, which driver is likely to set the fastest lap. That's going to be really interesting for people to get engaged and try to make bets on who's setting the fastest lap time, which pit crew is performing really well. It'll be very interesting to see how everything turns out as this works out because it can definitely get more fans engaged with the sport. Now, one thing to note as well too, there are other betting series such as DraftKings along with MGM. They're all going to be competing for all this information to try to get it directly from NASCAR. Do you see this becoming more and more lucrative, not just for NASCAR, but for any series that holds all this data? And you got companies like DraftKings, like BetMGM, competing against each other for this information?
I mean, if you're trying to make a good bet and all of that, you're going to need as much statistics as you can possibly get your hands on. But because, for example, Jimmy Johnson's been really good at Dover throughout his career, although his performance definitely hasn't been the same, in the last few years in comparison to his prime years. Definitely you would look at those stats and see, like, hey, Jimmy Johnson is good at Dover, so I believe I'm going to place a bet on him today, or Kevin Harvick in Phoenix. You look at Kevin Harvick's stats at Phoenix, and you're like, holy cow, this guy is unbelievable here. And if I was betting, I'd bet on Kevin Harvick every single time at Phoenix until he retires because I don't trust anybody else but Kevin Harvick at Phoenix. And that also helps when you've been following the sport as well because typically when we go to a track, you know which drivers are probably going to run well at that track and which drivers like quote unquote own that track. Like like they used to call Lowe's Motor Speedway, Charlotte Motor Speedway now, Jimmy Johnson's house because he was just so good there. And and some people also call Martinsville like Jeff Gordon's house for a while, as and definitely that background knowledge of the sport helps as well. But also those statistics could be beneficial to people who don't really hold the same type of knowledge yet, brand new to the scene. So I certainly believe that having access to as much information and statistics as you can, that is that's definitely going to help those people make the correct bet so they don't lose out.
Definitely is going to be a handy guide to making the proper bets and being competitive when it comes to betting. Of course, this is something that we'll definitely be following. And speak about betting, we're going to turn to one of the series where it's very unpredictable. It's a series right now I would want to place a bet on, and that's Formula E.
You're right about that. As you see, my pick of winner is looking bad right now. Started off good, but oh, it went south. Formula E is definitely a very unpredictable series. On today for Formula E, it was as unpredictable all the way around from qualifying and through the race. Nobody could have predicted what we saw today. Started off and there was mayhem in Group One of qualifying, where only two drivers set a time, and Tony and those not making a time were all past champions. Antonio Phillips da Costa, who's the current champion of Formula E, Jean-Eric Verde, who's won the past two Formula E championships, Sebastian Buemi, and also Lucas Degrassi. Man, it was like really crazy. So Joe, who's to blame for this mess we saw in qualifying? The teams or Formula E?
Has to be on the teams. This is the same rule we've had all year long, as well as last year. And this is just very similar to what we saw happen at Monza last year with Formula One and NASCAR at Auto Club Speedway last year as well. Nobody wanted to be the first one out because you will be the slow car. And really behind you could definitely grab, use that slipstream, the toe, as we all know in those different terms, to get a faster lap. So what happened today? Well, the two Nishida cars, they were out front. They essentially prevented Buemi, Lucas Degrassi, the opportunity to set a lap. After the race, Lucas Degrassi was just majorly upset, citing that he believes that the Nishida team did this on purpose to prevent him from keep setting a lap and try to keep Fern in second place. Of course, as we'll explain, that didn't work out. But this is definitely something where it's on the teams. You're playing these strategy, you're playing these mind games, and it backfired today big time.
Yeah, it seemed like Formula E definitely had their NASCAR Fontana moment there, and Formula One also had the same type of issue last year. Can't really remember what track that was off the top of my head right now, but Oliver Rowland in the Nissan ended up taking pole in a surprising lineup that resulted in a race that we will never forget for a long time. And then lights out and away we go. Green came out and Oliver Rowland cleared for the lead, and then Sam Bird sustained damage on the opening lap, which ended up ruining his day, and he would finish way back in 20th. And Lucas Degrassi and Max Gunther made contact, and Gunther punctured a tire and was out for the day. So more bad luck for Max Gunther. And John Eric Berg was issued a drive-through penalty for battery overcooling and ended up scoring no points for the team's champions, DS Cheetah. And then more trouble for Lucas Degrassi. He made contact with current champion Antonio Phillips da Costa, spun and pitted for damage, and he was handed a 5-second time penalty and ended up scoring no points as well. In the end, Oliver Rowland took the win, but the big story was on the last lap. But there was a crazy battle between Rene Rost and Andre Lauderer. Joe, what in the world happened there?
Classic Formula E. This is what Jack, myself, and many other people refer to that Formula E is so unpredictable. It's a contact sport. We saw these two. Ladra, he had less battery, so he was trying everything he can to keep that position. Rast beating and banging, pushing, and then when he crossed the finish line, he had some significant damage in front of his wheel. It was just amazing battle, and this was the kind of battle that I think a lot of folks were anticipating for the championship that we were going to see throughout the field. Of course, championship's already been determined. It was dominated by Antonio Felix Acosta, but this was the kind of racing that we all anticipate with Formula E, being banging, unpredictable, and just left everyone talking about the finish.
Yeah, speaking of Antonio Felix da Costa, he was in 11th on the final lap, but problems with his battery took him out and ended up finishing a disappointing 23rd. And, looking at all of the crazy, unpredictable, nature of today's race, and, I guess it kind of reminded some people like a NASCAR race out there with all the contact and stuff. Did today prove that you must qualify in the top 10 at Berlin in order to have any chance of winning here?
Yes, it did. And I feel going forward, it's going to prove if you want that championship, you need to qualify in the top 10 for every race. Berlin is a pretty wide track, has some wide spots for passing and overtaking. When we get to tracks next year, like Monaco, Santiago, Chile, especially Uruguay, these tracks are street courses, much tighter, much more narrow. You're going to really need to have a good qualifying lap. And I think going forward, this is something for all the teams to realize. If we're in Group 1, even Group 2, but definitely if you're in Group 1, we need to figure out a way to set a fast lap so we're up front. We can't afford to try to start in the back and climb our way to the front.
And tomorrow we get to do it all over again for one final time in 2020 for Formula E. So tomorrow we're gonna have Group 1 a qualifying again. So what in the world do you do in Group 1?
If I'm in Group 1, I'm not going to make the same mistake again. Now, of course, Lucas de Grassi, he's going to be in Group 2, so he doesn't have to worry about that. But definitely, Antonio Felix da Costa, he said they just miscalculated. Well, they know they're not going to miscalculate. And a good point our friends at Formula E Zone pointed out, the DS Cheetah has nothing to lose. They wrapped up the championship. They got first place in the championship. If anything, John-Eric Vergne was a big loser. He's out of second place now in the points, which again switched. So definitely go out there, set a fast lap. If you're in the top 10, no matter where, it's much better than being way in the back of the pack like what happened today.
Certainly, in Formula E, like you mentioned, I strongly agree that you have to qualify in the top 10 if you want any chance of winning in Berlin. Like, this is a really crazy tight track. With overtaking all of that, it seemed like the best way for it to make passing, as Calvin Fish like to say, go through some argy bargy with all of the contact in order to get through. Although it didn't really work out the best today for Lucas de Grassi, caught up in two incidents with Max Gunther and then Antonio Felix da Costa, the champion. Yeah, you just believe that you really do need to just qualify in the top 10, and then you can move forward from there. If you're like starting 20th, oh boy, you're probably gonna have a ton of scratches on your car when you come in after the checkered flag.
A ton of scratches and a big battle up ahead. That's what every Formula E team faces when they're starting mid pack. Of course, the same is true if you're in NASCAR Cup Series and you're starting mid pack. One of those teams, Spire Motorsports. Of course, Spire Motorsports, they essentially purchased a 95 charter for next year. For fans not familiar with how the charter system works in NASCAR, the charter system is essentially a guarantee to teams that you will start a race. In the past, you had qualifying. If you didn't qualify, you had a provisional, but only a limited number of provisionals. Because of the race team alliance, if you have a chart, you are locked in to every race you attempt to start, and there's fewer charters than starting positions. So these are very lucrative. And with this charter for next year, Spire Motorsports will expand to 2 cars. Currently, right now, they have 1 car, the 77 car. They're looking at expanding to 2, which is going to be a very exciting opportunity for the team. If you're in charge of Spire Motorsports, knowing that you're going to have 2 car team, will you be looking at a partnership with Gibbs or any other alliance to help with technical and even get a quality driver for next year?
Well, considering what's happened to Furniture Road Racing and Levine Family Racing, if I was Spire Motorsports, I'd kind of want to back away from aligning with Gibbs at the moment. But however, if I could get an alliance with another manufacturer or another team that's at least semi-competitive, better than what Spire is right now, I definitely look into that. I don't know if Spire would go towards a JGR TRD partnership. It's just certainly going to be an interesting thing to see with Spire Motorsports. I understand, with the Spire agency, some people have criticized this team because they believe that it was like a conflict of interest and all of that. But Spire right now they're running towards the back of the cup field, and they're not really competitive at all. And if Spire wants to move forward, is purchasing the 95 teams charter for next year, spanning to a 2 car operation. It's certainly going to be interesting to see if Spire is going to work hard and try to make their cars better moving forward.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of hard work moving forward to try to get that team better and better each week. Having that charter, yeah, that's a guarantee. You're starting. You don't have to worry about failing to qualifying, missing a race because you weren't fast enough. Now you're in the show. As long as you show up, you're ready to race. You're going to be good to go at race. Of course, there are quite a few wild card events Daytona, Talladega, the short tracks, they could get a good driver. They may be struggling at the mile and a half, but if they could take advantage of some of the mistakes, especially one of the things we're seeing with this format where wins get you in, the consistency is dropping off. Of course, two top drivers right now, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Hart, very consistent. They're always up there, but the rest of the field, you can see like even Blaney and Kozlowski, they went out. They got a couple DNFs. If they could race clean, have good drivers, and take advantage of the moment, I see them possibly climbing up the rank. And if having an alliance might be a good idea, but they definitely got to be careful about that. It's going to be really interesting to see what the future holds for Spire Motorsports.
Yeah, you definitely don't know what the future holds for Spire. Maybe they'll stay where they are, and or they'll get an alliance, or if not, they'll improve on their own and get that program running a little bit better. Maybe about 25th, 30th, maybe sneak up close to the top 20. It's just going to be quite an interesting situation to follow. And another situation that we're following is in Watkins Glen with SRO America canceling Watkins Glen race weekend, and due to some tight restrictions from New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, it makes it really difficult to host a motor racing event up there in New York. And for Watkins Glen, this is another major blow. They've lost the IMSA Sailing 6 Hours of the Glen, the NASCAR Cup Series and Xfinity Series, and also ARCA was supposed to race there as well. And now the SRO America races. And this been the third major race weekend at Watkins Glen impacted by the global pandemic. And another example of a racetrack struggling, following cancellations was Iowa Speedway. They lost NASCAR, Xfinity, and truck races, and also Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. They lost the United States Grand Prix of Formula One and MotoGP. So, Joe, with all of these tracks I mentioned and many others losing significant revenue, do you think we should be worried about their futures?
I think so. It's only fair to be concerned, especially if they're one of your favorite racetracks. When we look at Watkins Glen, I feel like they're probably in a little bit of a better spot. They're owned by NASCAR. NASCAR could easily absorb some of the costs from the lost events, the lost revenue. But then when you have a circuit like Circuit of the Americas, they put on a big effort to try to gain revenue from Formula One, including like big time concerts during the weekend of Formula One. MotoGP, not having that's a big loss. And a lot of times what we're seeing is we're not seeing a whole lot of demand for brand new racetracks. The racetracks that we have currently are the racetracks that we're going to have for a long time to come. If we start having tracks financially struggling, it might be really bringing up red flag for the industry. Where if we have such great circuits like Circuit of Americas, other circuits where they're struggling because of this pandemic, doesn't make it where racing, especially for racetrack owners, seem like that lucrative, and could present some challenges, especially nervous investors and so on.
Yeah, certainly. It's an unfortunate incident going on right now, and not only our country, but all over the world. Many people, every sector, have been affected by this global pandemic. And looking at our little world right here in the motorsports world, it's not just the tracks, it's teams, drivers, sponsors, everyone involved being affected. And hopefully, when this terrible nightmare for all of us is all over, most people can get back on their feet. But unfortunately for some, it's definitely going to be the end of the road, and it's certainly a really sad situation to watch unfold in front of our eyes.
It is a pretty unfortunate situation. Definitely, I know one of the things with motorsports, it is such a competitive industry. Everyone's trying to get the upper hand of competition. But at the same time, if your competition is not healthy, the industry is not healthy because we all want to put on a good show for the fans and race. One of the big competitions we've been hearing about is who's going to line in the 20 seat. Last week was announced Eric Jones was out of it. Well, this week we found out, really to nobody's surprise, Christopher Bell, sort of the worst kept secret in the garage area, that Christopher Bell was going to be replacing Eric Jones in the 20 car next year for Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, Eric Jones, his future is still unknown, but of course, there's still rumors he might be in the 48 car next year. Definitely it's going to be interesting to follow everything as it carries on and starts to unfold. If you had to make a prediction, where do you see Eric Jones next year?
Well, if I had to guess, I'm gonna say the number 48 Ally Financial Chevrolet and Hendrick Motorsports. It seems like it makes the most sense right now since Adam Stern from the Sports Business Journal reported that Eric Jones and Jimmy Johnson share the same representative, so that might make things a little bit easier with Mr. Rick Hendrick. Also, we don't know what's going to happen with the 48 car as well. So, and another name you need to look at is Bubba Wallace and all of this because whatever Bubba Wallace decides to do might lead to what Eric Jones is going to do. But I'm not really sure who's going to make the first move in silly season, Eric Jones or Bubba Wallace, because Bubba Wallace has also been rumored to be a finalist for the 48 as well, and also he did confirm to Marty Snyder of NBC Sports that Bubba received an offer to drive the number 42 Chip Ganassi Racing, and if things don't work out for Eric Jones with the 48, the 42 might be an option for Eric Jones. It just seems like whatever happens, like Bubba Wallace and Eric Jones definitely hold the key to how everything else falls in place with silly season.
Silly season, every year it seems to come down to one or two drivers making their decision. Bubba Wallace is definitely a big one. Eric Jones, a lot of people are waiting for that. Now, of course, with Christopher Bell, he could just focus on racing. He has a few opportunities to try to earn a win, get in the playoffs. Really tricky Daytona, Dover. Not exactly the best tracks for rookies. Next year, though, he's a sophomore and he's going to be in the 20 car. Now, one of the big things, of course, when he goes in that 20 car, his teammates are Martin Truex Jr., past champion, Kyle Busch, two-time champion, and right now, Denny Hamlin, he's hoping that next year we're calling him the defending champion. How much pressure is there for Christopher Bell to race, especially since he has such caliber driver teammates?
Oh, definitely. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Christopher Bell. You mentioned those three drivers at JGR is going to be there next year with him. Denny Hamlin won a lot of races, had a lot of success, been close to winning the championship, but he just hasn't got there yet. And right now, definitely having one of the best seasons of his career right now. Could definitely be a champion at the end of the year if everything falls into play. You got Kyle Busch. The name speaks for itself. Kyle Busch is definitely a winner at all levels, and Kyle Busch has basically done everything in this sport but win the Daytona 500. And then Martin Truex Jr., another driver who who definitely has a lot of talent and has been very successful as well, and also past champion. Yes, certainly. When Christopher Bell, is compared to those three drivers, he definitely has a lot to live up to, and especially since Eric Jones has always seemed like he was a step below Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, and Martin Truex Jr. Bell's certainly going to be feeling a lot of pressure to see if he can have greater success in that 20 car than Eric Jones did.
Definitely, everybody's going to be comparing him to Eric Jones, see how well he does next year in the 20 car. So it's going to be really interesting to see everything next year as it develops for Christopher Bell. And of course, Eric Jones, with whatever team he lands with.
Yes, certainly. And another driver you just mentioned, Bubba Wallace, who's in the mix with silly season. But today, Bubba Wallace signed. It was announced that he signed a multi-year deal with Columbia Sportswear, and he's going to be its newest brand ambassador. This is the third major deal for Bubba Wallace this year. Earlier, he signed an endorsement with Beats by Dre and also sponsorship from Cash App. And with Bubba Wallace securing all of these brand new deals, do you think he'll be more attractive to other Cup teams outside of Richard Petty Motorsports? Because Joe, we all know this sport runs on sponsorship.
Very much so. You have a driver that says, I have all these personal sponsorships that I could bring to the team. You're more marketable. We see this a lot in Formula One, IndyCar, where a driver comes in with financial backing from a sponsor or even some relatives that have a lot of wealth that they put into the team. So Bubba Wallace, definitely, it's been really refreshing to see him with his activism, get sponsors, get the attention, and now he could really position himself for a good top quality ride.
And previously Bubba always had a lot of trouble securing sponsorship, and it seemed like his future was always up in the air. It was like, yes, I'm driving this car now, but I don't have any idea what I'm going to be doing next year. And some people have wondered this. Do you think is using his voice and his platform to speak up about social issues in our world, did that help elevate him to corporate businesses that may have never heard of Bubba Wallace before?
Yes, definitely. I know, especially with everything going on, a lot of times what we're seeing is a lot of companies They are recognizing now NASCAR and their athletes for their involvement, especially when it comes to, involved with the community. We've known for a long time drivers always have charities where they promote good causes. With Bubba Wallace, it's a little different. He is promoting, social justice, equality for all, and essentially, end racism. There's no company out there in the world that would disagree with that message. And I think it's really refreshing, not just for Bubba Wallace, but in sports world. Because we recall when we saw Colin Kaepernick took a knee, Nike came in, they sponsored him. Now we're seeing more sponsors get involved, especially with athletes that are using their platform to call for reform. And it's very exciting to see Columbia. You go to such stores such as REI where they sell Columbia outdoor gear, you don't see a whole lot of like NASCAR fans. You don't associate Columbia with as a NASCAR sponsor compared to some of the traditional automotive products, other products that we see. So having Columbia enter NASCAR, that's really exciting. The Cash App, that's really exciting. It's really exciting because we're seeing new sponsors come in for Bubba Wallace. And then, of course, as they see, and the other drivers too, I think this is a win for everyone, but definitely Bubba Wallace for bringing the attention of, social justice for everybody in the United States.
Yeah, I think Bubba Wallace decided to use his platform to stand up for what he believes is morally right. I think, beforehand, a lot of businesses, didn't really like look at Bubba Wallace, and some of them probably didn't even know who he was, if I'm being honest. But now, since Bubba has decided to use his platform for the greater good, these businesses are starting to see, hey, here's a guy right here that can represent my brand well. He's very marketable and has a great personality. I wanna jump on board and sponsor him. So I certainly believe that Bubba Wallace, showing his leadership and and you know, s- giving, providing his own voice on these tough emotional issues right now in our society. It's certainly making Bubba Wallace look like a driver that many corporate businesses will want to sponsor moving forward. And heading throughout the rest of the season and looking into next year, Bubba's looking good right now. I think for the first time in his career, I can definitely say with a lot of confidence that Bubba Wallace is going to be racing full time next year because he has a lot of great deals on the table right now. It's just a matter of who's he going to race for. Is he going to return to Richard Petty Motorsports and help elevate the Petty name back to its glory days, or is he gonna go for a more competitive ride at Chip Ganassi Racing or even Hendrick Motorsports? Yeah, regardless of what Bubba Wallace chooses, he has solidified his future in this sport. And next, it's time for some quick takes.
Definitely when it comes to some of the news going around the motorsport world, 22-year-old American driver Matt Mcmurray joined Algarve Pro Wrestling for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He'll be driving the number 25 LMP2 car with teammates Simon Trummer and John Falb. In 2014, McMurray was the youngest driver to ever attempt and finish the 24 Hour of Le Mans at the age of 16 years and 202 days.
I'm sure you all have already seen the 33 drivers that will be competing in this year's Indianapolis 500. However, there are 5 drivers that are missing from this year's race, starting with Oriol Servia, who has 11 starts in the Indy 500, had a best finish of fourth in 2012, and the last time Oriol Servia missed the greatest spectacle in racing was 2010. And number 2, Stephen Wilson, he was unable to put together a deal this year for the race. However, one of his most shining moments was in 2018 when he was leading the Indianapolis 500 late until he had to pit for fuel, and eventually Will Power ended up winning that race. Number 3, Pippa Mann, she has 7 starts in the Indy 500, and with her absence and no other female driver in the field, this is going to be the first time in 2 decades that we will not have a woman competing in the Indy 500. Next, Sebastian Bourdais. He has 8 starts in the Indy 500, had a best finish of seventh in 2014. And initially, Sebastian Bourdais had scheduled to run with AJ Foyt Racing this year at St. Pete, Barber, Long Beach, and Portland. However, the pandemic and cancellations have definitely ruined Sebastian Bourdais' schedule. Unfortunately, Barber, Long Beach, and Portland are no longer a part of the 2020 schedule. So if it happens, the only IndyCar race that Sebastian Bourdais will be running this year is the season finale Firestone Grand Prix on the streets of St. Pete. And finally, Carlos Munoz, or should I call him Mr. Indy. Carlos Munoz has 6 starts in the Indy 500, and he finished second twice. And in those 6 starts, he finished in the top 10 5 times. And and he scored an impressive second place finish in his 2013 IndyCar debut in the Indy 500. And the field of 33 might be set right now, unfortunately, some things usually happen, and the 5 drivers I just mentioned, they might be options if the driver is injured in a crash or test positive for the virus. So if the unfortunate happens, we hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, you might want to look at those 5 drivers that I just mentioned as possible replacement if the worst case scenario occurs.
The 2020 24 Hours of Le Mans will continue to take place next month. However, it's going to be running behind closed doors. No fans will be allowed to attend the event. It's a strange year with entries pulling out and teams on reserves list getting in the race. For a good example, Corvette Racing won't be racing at the 24 Hours of Le Mans for the first time in decades. Early on, success from the Corvette Racing, along with IMSA, gave the opportunities for the future Le Mans when Corvette returns. The ACO president, Pierre Fouillon, said decisions were made based on the number of virus cases rising in France. Fans are still able to follow the race from home, but instead of people going in person to Le Mans, Fouillon promises to bring Le Mans to the fans. Of course, a lot of people praise the 24 Hours Le Mans virtual race that had occurred earlier this year.
In a recent interview with the media, Fernando Alonso said that he will be unable to race in the Indy 500 in 2021 and 2022 due to his return to Formula One with Renault. However, in next year, the Monaco Grand Prix and the Indy 500 won't conflict. However, qualifying weekend might be an issue because if Alonso were to run the Indy 500, there might have to be a driver to practice and qualify the car, and then Alonso would have to come over the following week, for maybe just one shakedown practice and race, and that's it. But however, the Formula One schedule for next year has not been released yet, so we don't know what qualifying weekend is going to look like. And Alonso doesn't think that he's going to be able to race with Arrow McLaren SP while under contract with Renault.
Definitely one of the things we're following is the new SRX series, Tony Stewart and Ray Abraham's new IROC-like series that's going to be racing next summer, 2021. Bobby Labonte is now the newest driver to be named in the list for the All-Star Series. This, of course, means he'll be joining Tony Stewart, Tony Kanaan, and Paul Tracy in the brand new racing series.
In a shocking turn of events, DGM Racing and Alex Labay won their appeal after testing what appeared to be a NASCAR Xfinity car at the Daytona Road Course. Initially, the team was docked 75 points and fined $50,000. However, no reason was given to explain why the penalty was overturned, which had everybody stunned and jaw drops everywhere.
It was definitely very jaw-dropping, the news. A lot of people were shocked about it. It'll be interesting to see how he does this weekend at Daytona. Now, for everyone following and viewing us, definitely be sure to keep in tune with the Grid Network. Friday, noon Eastern, we will have Jack from Formula E Zone with us to recap the last 2 events at Berlin, Formula E Fest, and the championship. Saturday morning, noon Eastern, Grid Live pre-race. We got a busy weekend. Formula One, IndyCar, MotoGP, NASCAR, and the Australian Supercars are running this weekend. And of course, Sunday, Grid Live post-race. On the conclusion of the NASCAR race, we'll be on the air to break down the entire race weekend and see the latest grid ranking. For Kobe Lambeth at the podium finish, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching our program today. Please like and subscribe and have a wonderful evening.